Bombshell tonight in the investigation of the death of a young man, Nolan Wells. Death threats are flying. One actually says there's going to be blood, so much blood. Another death threat says, don't go outside. How can anybody do their jobs when they're getting death threats? Not only that, we understand this case is headed to a grand jury. We also learned tonight that the state's autopsy is complete.
There is a 911 call in this case, recorded by a state agency, released through official channels and heard by hundreds of thousands of people online. And buried inside that call, according to a professional audio engineer, are words that change everything. Or maybe they don't. That is the question nobody has been able to answer with certainty. Not yet. First, the state autopsy of Nolan Wells is reportedly complete. Toxicology, tissue studies, anatomical findings, all of it done. But the public has not seen a single page of it, and the documented reason given is an active investigation and a pending grand jury. That is not normal procedure for a routine accidental drowning. Second, an audio engineer working independently pulled the official 911 call apart channel by channel and says she heard a name, a statement, and a sequence of words that suggest someone on that boat already knew Nolan Wells was dead before emergency services arrived. Third, when the media asked whether the young men on that boat had taken polygraph examinations, the answer given publicly was yes. The documented truth, confirmed by a former FBI polygraph examiner, is no. They did not. This video is not about theories. It is about separating what is documented from what has spread online as fact. Those are two very different things. Let's be precise about which is which. Nolan Wells was 20 years old. He went to Horn Island, Mississippi, on July the 4th with a group of people on a boat. The island sits in the Gulf of Mexico, accessible only by water. It was crowded that day. Video documented later showed hundreds of people packed into that stretch of shoreline. He was reported missing, his body was recovered from the water, and the official circumstances of how he ended up there have never been publicly established with certainty. That last part matters, because a significant portion of what circulates online about this case treats certain things as settled that are not, in fact, settled at all. His mother has said publicly and consistently that she does not believe her son drowned accidentally. She has pointed to the fact that he was a strong swimmer and an athlete. She has pointed to the fact that he left his phone and his keys on the boat. She has pointed to the fact that according to at least one documented account, a young woman he was with that day sent a text message indicating she never saw him board the boat at all. These are real documented details. They are also disputed or unverified in parts. Worth sitting with, not worth treating as proof of anything.
Yeah, well, that's what the family is saying. They don't believe he died by accident. That's the point. That's the reason why Nolan Wells' mom is saying, I don't believe this. I don't believe he died by accident before we had the audio. The audio simply confirms that there are additional questions that needs to be asked. It wasn't just one thing they said in the audio. They said Nolan repeatedly in the audio. They said check his chest in the audio. They said, is he dead in the audio? And also notice this, Nancy. Did you notice that the operator also said, is anybody breathing? Who says that? What operator says who all is breathing on the boat? So is this all the audio, Nancy? Is there more audio? That's my question.
I want to look specifically, Teslin, at what was said. At one point, we think, you killed him? He's already dead. He's already dead? Is he dead? Yeah, Nolan, OMG, wake up. And as Janetta stated, then she hears a completely different name, Bart. Now, we also hear, and I'm very curious, the phrase, no. Teslin Figaro, was that a nickname of Nolan Wells?
I cannot confirm if that's a nickname of his or not. But what I do know is we heard Nolan. What I do know is we heard check his chest. What I do know is that we said, is he dead? What we do know is we heard screams. There's folks out there suggesting that perhaps they were talking to a seagull or perhaps talking to some random bird that was flying around that's called no. There were folks out there that suggested, well, maybe they were talking about the boat. Come on, we got to knock this off, Nancy. We heard what we heard. And so we were to put this before a jury.
Also, we hear, damn it, Bart, No-No's really dead. Damn it, Bart, No-No's really dead. Repeating it over and over and over. According to reports, his nickname, one of them, is No-No.
What happened on that island and on that boat is not established in any public court record. Not yet. Now let's talk about the 9/11 call, because this is where the documented record gets genuinely complicated and where myth has outpaced fact faster than in almost any other part of this case. A distress call was placed to Sea-Taw, a marine assistance company, from the boat Nolan Wells was last seen on. That call was recorded. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released that recording through official channels. A local news outlet, Double Awax, published it on their YouTube page. That is the chain of custody for the audio. That part is documented. An audio engineer named Janetta Brantley downloaded that recording and processed it using professional software called Logic Pro X. She has stated clearly that she was not looking for evidence of a crime. She was not hired by anyone. She had no interest in the outcome of the case. What she did was a standard audio isolation technique. The recording was a dual mono format, meaning the caller's end and the dispatch end were separated into left and right channels. She isolated the caller's channel, which allowed background voices on the boat to become more audible.
First and foremost, I basically downloaded it off of YouTube from WLOX News's YouTube site. And when I downloaded it, I ripped it off of YouTube. That's the terminology that we use when we take something off of YouTube. But when I ripped it off of YouTube
Pause.
and I pulled it in.
Pause, please. Objection. Miss Brantley, isn't it true
Yes.
that the audio you got was taken directly by XLO from MDMR? Correct? The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay, please continue, Miss Brantley.
So when I downloaded it from YouTube, I pulled it into my DAW, which is Logic Pro X. That's my DAW of choice. And when I first listened to it, I realized that it was like a dual mono recording, which most, most phone services or operators utilize when they're recording conversations. And so it was already split between the caller, the dispatch, and the callers in the background. And so that's what made it easy for me to isolate it without having to do much to it. So that isolation, when I separated the left channel from the right channel, that just made me be able to really focus on everything that was on the call end. And what I was hearing was I honestly could not believe
What she says she heard in that isolated audio is a name and a statement. The name Bart, the phrase as she described it, suggesting that Nolan was already dead at the time of that call.
I wasn't cleaning it or enhancing it to specifically look for or identify a crime or even point the fingers at anybody. I believe I wanted it to be an accident. I think a lot of us wanted it to be an accident. So when I heard those things, when I heard, damn it, Bart, that name stood out to me because I hadn't even heard that name before. As I was listening to certain things that stood out to me, I was in disbelief because, again, I'm just an audio engineer. I'm not an investigator or detective or anything like that. So when I heard a name that I wasn't familiar with, it stood out to me. And that alone made me want to hear what was immediately said after damn it, Bart. And so that's why in that process where damn it, Bart came in loud and clear to me, I decided to go over to the next part to hear what the rest of that statement was, which is where you saw me actually create a loop over that part, split that part, and then add a gain, which the gain is boosting the volume overall. And that's pretty much what you saw me do in that actual video. And so to hear, damn it, Bart, Nolan's really dead now, that I couldn't believe it.
Here is where precision matters. Brantley is a credible professional. Her process, as she described it, is technically sound and has not been disputed on methodological grounds by anyone with documented expertise in audio forensics. However, and this is important, she cannot testify in any future legal proceeding about whether the original audio file, before it was published online, had already been altered or processed by someone else. That is not a criticism of her. That is simply a limitation of the chain of custody. She received a file that had already passed through a state agency and a media outlet before it reached her. A court would need independent forensic verification of the original source file to establish evidentiary integrity.
So if I'm prosecuting this, I'm worried that I need a witness in 2026 to exclude the possibility that it's either AI generated or doctored, just like you suggested. And I think that she's very credible, but I think we need to go one step further. The other concern I have, Nancy, is if the independent autopsy is showing inconclusive death results, now I really want to see the other autopsy to see, is there trauma to the body? Is there something that happened? These are the concerns I would have as a prosecutor.
Before we talk about obstructions such as allegedly lying or covering something up, you've already mentioned two distinct lines of inquiry. One is that the audio that Janetta Brantley enhanced innocently, I believe, had been already AI or doctored. Okay, let's follow that through to its logical conclusion. You just throw that out there like a stink bomb at the circle. You know what a circle meeting is, right? In the United Methodist Church, all the ladies have circle meetings. Okay. To suggest this was doctored before Janetta got it means it had to have been doctored or AI created by who? The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. No, don't just go, that doesn't work in court, Burkhartz. You can't just throw, that's like the sod defense. Some other dude did it. What dude? What are you talking about? So you're saying AI doctored by who? If it's not Janetta, then who? She got it. The same sound that was released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. What? You think they doctored it?
There is nothing normal about this case. And if the
That's
state...
not what I asked you. I'm asking you to explain your premise, and you're not doing it.
I said if I were a prosecutor, I would want to be able to establish with expert testimony that what we are listening to is real. And I would want a witness, because I'm telling you, with this case, with as viral as it's been, I'm not disagreeing that it's real. I'm saying I would want to be able to bolster that very credible woman's testimony, and she is very credible. I have no doubt that what we're listening to and what she did is credible. The issue is I don't know if she can go the distance to say,
okay, right, got it. She cannot testify as to whether MDMR had enhanced it or doctored it before it was.
That distinction has been almost entirely absent from online coverage of this case. Most of what spread virally treated the enhanced audio as confirmed evidence. It is not confirmed evidence. It is audio that raises documented questions and requires further expert verification. Those are not the same thing. Here is the mid-correction that deserves its own moment. Because something spread widely and it was wrong. Multiple outlets and social media accounts reported that the young men present on the boat that day had taken and passed polygraph examinations. That framing suggested a level of investigative rigor that simply was not present when this specific claim was examined by a former FBI special agent and trained polygraph examiner. The conclusion was clear. What the young men reportedly took was not a polygraph. It was most likely a voice stress analyzer, a technology that detects micro stressors in the voice. The scientific research supporting the reliability of voice stress analysis is, according to documented expert consensus, considerably weaker than that supporting traditional polygraph examination.
Have the friends taken polygraphs?
Well, from my understanding, all but I believe one took a polygraph, and from what was told to me that they all passed, and all of the ones that took a polygraph took one without a lawyer. And they cooperated with law enforcement. So from my understanding, everybody took a polygraph test. Why do you say that's from what you
understand? Did they tell you they took a poly and passed?
Yes, ma'am. They told me that they did it. I wasn't there. So that's what I'm saying from my understanding. They told me that all the boys except one, which is Warren, I believe, took a polygraph test. All of them did not have lawyers and did it and cooperated with police. Warren also cooperated with police. I just believe he didn't take a lot to take the test, but Warren is the young man that I interviewed. So according to what they told me, they all took a lie detector test and passed. And it's an equivalent of a lie detector test. It's not a traditional lie detector test, but it's the same theology of trying to get to if a person is lying. I don't know the name of it. It's an equivalent of a lie detector test. It's a different methodology. I don't believe it was a polygraph test. I believe they took other stressors in order to analyze if the people were telling the truth or not. So then the answer to
did they take a polygraph would be no. He's charming. He's well-spoken. But that was no. That was a no. They did not take a polygraph test, and not all of them took the, as he is calling it, the equivalent.
A polygraph measures respiration, cardiovascular activity, electrodermal response, and peripheral movement simultaneously. It establishes a physiological baseline through neutral questions, then measures deviation from that baseline when specific case, relevant questions are asked. The questions themselves matter enormously. Vague or open-ended questions can produce meaningless results even on a genuine polygraph.
So polygraph does have very specific markers, and we're looking for physiological changes in baseline or truth signature. So we're looking at things like respiration, heart rate, electrodermal activity, which most people interpret as sweat gland activity. We're looking at peripheral movements to try and determine if someone's trying to cheat on the test. So it's quite extensive. And I think what the Officer Tatum was probably referring to, whether he realized it or not, was the voice stress analyzer. I think he used that word one time, some kind of stressor test. It's probably that they might have taken.
Hi guys, American homeowners. The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud called title theft, and your equity is the target. With just a forged signature, your ownership can be transferred out of your name, and without protection in place, you're left with an emotional and financial nightmare. That is why we partner with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim and protect yourself. Use promo code Nancy at HometitleLock.com to get a free title history report plus a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring, urgent alerts, and if you're a victim of fraud, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your home equity today. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Nancy, or just use the link below. And good luck. I'm speaking to an expert, former FBI Special Agent Polygrapher, George Olivo. As I recall just off the top of my head, a polygraph measures things you really cannot control unless you can have studied and practiced beating a poly. Involuntary physical stress responses, blood pressure, heart rate, breathing rate, whether you're sweating. Tubes around your chest and abdomen track your breathing, and even not just how fast you're breathing, but the depth of your breathing. Does your breathing become shallow? Do you have to pause and take deep breaths to calm yourself down? A traditional poly, measures cardiovascular activity. There's a blood pressure cuff on your arm, and it measures your pulse and your blood pressure fluctuation. It also measures what's called electrodermal activity. What is that? I've had to explain it a million times to jurors. Sensors attached to the fingers measure your sweat gland activity and even your skin electrical conductivity. The examiner then asks neutral questions like, is your name George Olivo? Are you from Cincinnati, Ohio? Are you from LA, California? Are you a polygrapher? Were you with the FBI? Were you there when Nolan Wells died? That's how that would work. You would lay a foundation of non-disturbing questions, baseline questions they're called, to get the person that's being subjected to a poly to get their baseline heart rate, their blood pressure, and so forth. Then when you hit them with a question regarding the case, You see if there's any change in that. Okay, I know I'm speaking as a layperson, Georgia Levo, but those are some of the things a polygraph measures.
You nailed it. Yeah, that's right, Nancy. And let me just add that the correlation between deception and physiology is nothing new. It goes back 4,000 years. Back in China, when the emperor was questioning one of his subjects, he would have a doctor standing by to listen to the heart rate to determine if the person was telling the truth or not. And we've been studying it ever since.
What is the test that Officer Tatum is talking about? To what is he referring?
I think, and he was kind of cryptic, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, maybe he didn't really know, but it sounded like he was referring to a voice stress analyzer. Those are these machines that detect microstressors electronically in the voice. The research is very weak on that and that type of technology. I guess it's better than nothing, but the bottom line is, and I'm speaking as a polygraph examiner, and I'm saying this, no diagnostic tool, and you know this obviously, should ever be used as a final verdict. I mean, it is just one piece of the truth puzzle. But obviously, if you had a choice between a voice stress analyzer and a polygraph, there's really no comparison. A polygraph is going to be way more preferable.
Voice stress analysis does not do any of that. It is not admissible in criminal court. And critically, at least one of the young men reportedly did not take even that test. So the widely circulated claim that everyone on the boat passed a polygraph is not accurate. That is documented. That matters. Now to the autopsy. And here is where the most consequential unanswered question in this case currently sits. According to reporting that emerged publicly, the state medical examiner's autopsy of Nolan Wells is complete. The full examination is done. Toxicology results, histological tissue studies, anatomical findings, all of it reportedly finished. None of it has been released to the public. Under normal circumstances, an autopsy report in Mississippi is a public document. There is no standard procedure by which a completed report is simply withheld indefinitely. The documented explanation given is that the case is under active investigation and may be headed to a grand jury. Legal experts have noted that under state statute, a district attorney or prosecutor can request that a coroner or medical examiner hold off on releasing a report during an ongoing investigation. That is a real legal mechanism. It is being used here. But here is the detail that does not get enough attention in typical coverage. There are two separate official entities involved. Mississippi has both a state medical examiner and a county coroner. The coroner is an elected official who does not perform autopsies. The state medical examiner performs the examination and provides that service to the county. The coroner, however, is the gatekeeper for releasing the document. That layered structure means the question of why the report is being held is not simple. It involves at least two offices and potentially direct direction from the prosecutor's office.
Because it's continued investigation, they're going to go to grand jury with this. I can tell you that. I'll bet you dollars to donuts if that's the case. We see it with, we saw it with Idaho 4, right? We didn't have it there. We don't have it with Charlie Kirk. You know, that's an ongoing event. This is being investigated. And, you know, the point of contact here is an interesting situation here because you have the state medical examiner, but you also have a county coroner. The state medical examiner provides a service to the county coroner. The coroner is an elected official. He does not do these autopsies. And so the coroner is going to be the gatekeeper relative to any kind of document. But with that said, under state statute, the DA, the prosecutor, they can say, look, you're going to hold off on releasing this report. So it's being held at this point in time. Now, the reports that we're hearing are saying that it is complete. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you have a complete autopsy report, that means they've got tox, they've probably got histology, which is going to be the tissue studies, and they actually have the anatomical autopsy report that has been completed. That's what, I think it was ABC that was reporting that. I can't validate that, but that's what is being leaked out at this point in time. So they have this report. I think the question is, and this goes back to you, my friend, is that if this is going to be a grand jury thing, when is it going? And when is the medical examiner going to be called and summoned to speak to this? That's what everybody's going to be hanging on in my.
What we do not know is what that report says. We do not know the official cause of death as determined by the state. We do not know what the toxicology panel revealed. We do not know whether the physical findings from the state examination align with, contradict, or complicate the findings of the independent second autopsy conducted on behalf of the family. That second autopsy was performed by the former chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C., a highly respected figure in forensic pathology. That examiner noted findings on the back of Nolan's head, described as significant discoloration in the occipital region. He was unable to establish causation because the body showed significant decomposition by the time it reached him in D.C. He noted the absence of neck organs and the absence of intact lungs, both of which are critical to establishing or ruling out drowning as cause of death. He did not find evidence of skull fractures, but absence of fracture does not rule out a concussive injury, and decomposition compromises almost everything.
Yeah, so whatever has been the causal factors here has got to marry up with what they were seeing at the scene, and perhaps the audio does fall into this. These statements. And I think that probably from a medical legal perspective, that is the coroner and the medical examiner are going to want to be able to fully appreciate what is being said here from a timeline. This is absent the police's investigation. They're going to try to rule in or rule out what they're seeing presenting on Nolan's remains when they finally did receive them at the state medical examiner's office and that examination began. And this is going to be critical and key, because the causal effects here are going to be critical. We go back to these changes that the second autopsy referred to on the back of the head. Now, the doctor was not able to, at that point in time, even though he did do a thorough, what's referred to as a layered dissection here, he could not establish the causal effects here because the injury or the insult that you see there, this presentation, is compromised by decomposition. So what did the state medical examiner see? My problem is here, Nancy, how was the body treated before or after the first autopsy and the body is transported up to D.C.? I have questions about this because they're talking about to the degree with which the body was decomposed. The doctor up in D.C. is seeing significant decomposition. We don't know what they saw in Mississippi, but I do know that you're only talking about and I'm ballparking here, please give me some grace, maybe 48 hours tops. Before the medical legal authorities have seen the body. So how far degraded is the body to compromise any of this? And this evidence is going to have to be borne out, not just with the physical findings that you see with the unaided eye, but also whatever.
Here is the open question that the documented record genuinely does not resolve, and it is worth sitting with. Why was the body in such a state of decomposition when it reached the second examiner? What was the condition of the body at the time of the first autopsy in Mississippi? And how was it handled and transported between examinations? Those questions have not been answered publicly. If you have any documented information or have seen reporting that addresses that specific gap, the comments are the right place for that conversation. Then there is the matter of the threats. And this part of the record is documented clearly because federal charges have been filed. A man from Sacramento, California, was arrested on federal charges of interstate transmission of threatening communications. The documented threat he sent targeted the stepmother of one of the young men who was on the boat with Nolan Wells. She is a judge. The threat referenced blood. It referenced the boat. It threatened her life in graphic terms and referenced a device being sent to her office. Separately, a woman from Cincinnati, Ohio, was charged in federal court in the Southern District of Mississippi with a similar offense. She had reportedly contacted 2 Mississippi officials more than 25 times, making bomb threats related to this investigation. 2 federal arrests documented. These are not allegations circulating online. These are federal charges with court filings.
That was from a man out of Sacramento, now arrested and threatening the judge who is the stepmother of Warren. And talk about frightening, saying, a lot of blood. There'll be a lot of blood like there was on the boat, but yours will be much faster.
The perp is Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumars, arrested Thursday on charges of interstate transmission of threatening communication. Now, these are federal documents. What did he threaten one of the young men's mom with, Susan?
The threats were against Warren, one of the boys on the boat, his stepmother, who is a judge. And it was graphic. It was brutal, saying there will be blood everywhere, threatening her life, talking about on the boat, saying
it really does. It says that he is sending a bomb to her office that will, quote, blow you away when you see it. Once that package is open, the timer will start. Then you have 10 seconds or less to ask God for forgiveness. So much blood everywhere. Hard to clean, especially from a boat. That was in that letter. And there is another death threat, Susan Hendricks, to Mississippi law enforcement saying, don't go outside. What happened with that?
Yeah, Cincinnati, Ohio woman calling two officials out of Mississippi several times, more than 25 times. Here is her mugshot. And you're right. Don't go outside, saying there's a bomb. So the threats are they're taking them seriously, as they should, and 2 arrests so far.
That's right.
What is less documented and deserves equal weight in this conversation is that Nolan Wells' own family has also reported receiving threats. That part has received considerably less coverage. A family grieving a son, navigating an active investigation, receiving threats, and largely left out of the mainstream threat narrative. That asymmetry is worth naming.
Absolutely. And, I don't condone violence on anybody, but I do want to put some context behind this, Nancy, as well. I was a police officer in the Air Force. You're talking about government officials, meaning I'm sure the judge has received threats. I'm sure the police officer has received threats, although they should not happen. But these are individuals that have taken, just like you and I, have taken on, positions that it comes with the territory. You have received death threats. I have received death threats. So the people that's not being talked about that's receiving the death threats is Nolan Wells' mother and father. Why is nobody talking about the death threats with them? They've reported it. Why isn't anybody arresting the people who are actually harassing the victims? It's online. It's available for people to see. So I just find it very interesting that there's so much sympathy for a police officer who not only do they receive death threats, they put their life on the line. They signed up and raised their hand to say, hey, pick me for the death threats and pick me to give my very life, as I did in the Air Force. So it is not right what is happening, but we also have to shine a light on the actual victims, the actual people who are grieving the loss of their son, and nobody gives a damn about the death threats that they're receiving.
Here is where this case sits right now, based entirely on what is documented. The state autopsy is complete and sealed. The case is reportedly moving toward a grand jury. 2 federal arrests have been made related to threats connected to this investigation. The 911 audio has been enhanced by an independent professional and raises documented questions, but has not been forensically verified at the source level. The young men on the boat did not take polygraph examinations in any legally or scientifically meaningful sense of that term, and the cause of Nolan Wells' death has not been officially established in any public record.
Have you noticed that people are making a lot of the fact that Nolan was, quote, drunk? A, how do they know that? And B, does it make a difference?
Yeah, well, I've absolutely noticed it, that he was allegedly, they're saying he was drunk, and it doesn't make a difference. And let me ask you this, Nancy. If he was drunk with other teenage kids, he certainly wasn't drunk by himself. So if he was drunk, why was he the only drunk one that ended up dead? Secondly, if this was an accident, let's say he just got so drunk and just passed out, why didn't anybody report it? So even if it was an accident, even if he got drunk, which I don't believe, by the way, even if all those things happened, why did his so-called friends not report it? That's the part that we're missing. So where's the answers to that, Nancy? He just went and just said, I'm just going to be drunk and just go in the middle of the ocean and just die with hundreds and hundreds of people who are around, who are watching? Nobody saw anything happen. His friends didn't see anything happen. And again, I go back to this tape. I will not sit up here and pretend that I did not hear what was on that tape. And I ask again, even the operator said, who is breathing on the boat? Don't you think that's strange, Nancy? Who's breathing?
Everything else circulating is opinion theory or myth. Some of that myth started with a single social media post. Some of it started with a misheard word. Some of it started with a genuine question that got twisted into a certainty it never earned. The grand jury is the next documented development to watch when and if that process moves forward, and if the state autopsy report becomes part of the public record. This case will either answer the questions it has raised or deepen them. Both outcomes are possible. The next video in this case will go deeper into the forensic chain of custody for that 911 recording and what independent audio forensic verification would actually require to be court admissible. Because that question is the one this whole case may eventually hinge on. A young man is dead. His family does not have answers. The public record does not have answers. If you have followed this case closely and there is a documented detail you think deserves more attention, put it in the comments. Not theories. Documented details. That is what moves this forward.